Well, now we're in the studio for Soundstage, and it's a snowy day in Colorado. A lot of power went out last night. The screening of Skill Like This had to be canceled due to the weather, and so they're going to be doing another screening tonight, which we plan to go to interview the patrons there. We're very lucky to have the cast and crew in the studio with us. What I'd like to do is first get into each of you so our viewers can get an idea of where you came from. How did you get to sit in this seat right here, and how did you get down this path?
My first interest in filmmaking came from going to films as a little kid and discovering my parents' Super 8 movie camera. And I spent endless hours experimenting and trying to create my own films as a hobby that sort of attracted me more so than, organized sports or what have you. When I went to college, my father said, "Well, why don't you do something you've always wanted to do that you've never lost interest in?" And he said, he said, "Why don't you be a meteorologist or something?" And because he saw me playing with cameras, and I said, "Well, I guess people actually make a living as filmmakers." And so at the University of Colorado, I studied filmmaking and was also in the journalism school. And started, as soon as I got out, I started a commercial production company, and I figured that would be a good graduate school to learn how to be a better filmmaker.
Right. Yeah. A couple interesting things I read about is that when you used to do your Super 8 films, you talked about how your friends would get hurt or get bored, or you wouldn't even make it to the second script. How did they get hurt?
Well, there was a few incidents with squibs, which I had read about squibs, and I made them with black cat fireworks and would literally tape them to a body, and I'd cut out a little horseshoe shape in a shirt, and I'd have the camera on a tripod, and you'd see me lighting the black cat firework, and I'd have a bag of blood, concealed by the shirt, and I'd light it, and then I'd run off and get behind the camera, and there's always an actor doing this. And so you learn about editing there. And so you cut to the guy shooting, and then you cut all the stuff with the smoke coming out and the guy doing this, and it's sort of magical that you just cut to the impact, and nobody saw the actor doing this. But I blew off a couple pieces of skin. And
you've kept all that? You still have all that old footage?
Yes, it's archived somewhere.
That's pretty cool. It was interesting that your father and your mother, well, your father was, he was in the military in the Air Force, right?
Yes, sir.
And your mother was a hairstylist, right? And they were very open about you going into whatever field you really wanted to go to, right?
Well, when I was a senior in high school, I sort of needed a path. And the military had been a wonderful life for my father. And I figured sort of, if I can get in, that's a great step. And I also thought it would be really neat to be a pilot. Once I got in there, I got accepted, and which was, pretty cool, achievement, and I was excited about it. And I got there, and I was kind of a punk rock kid that was in the Air Force Academy. And so after about 6 months, my grades were not doing really great, and so I got to sit before a bunch of officers and explain to them that I didn't really think I belonged there anymore. And so I left the Air Force Academy, I resigned, and went to sort of the polar opposite, CU Boulder.
Right.
And
then from there you started your own production company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started, when you intern in film school, you're instantly trying to get onto movie sets, and I would do that as started as a junior in college, trying to find ways onto movie sets. I learned pretty quickly, though, that you could not really work your way up as a grip to being a director, and that's why I studied film, was I enjoyed sort of creating things. And so I very quickly learned that I needed to just sort of start making films and not wait for somebody to come and say, "Hey, do you want to move up from being a PA or a grip to making films?"
One thing I tend to find out is most people in the film industry have worn several hats. For instance, like with you, Donna, you went and you took acting course so you could learn more what the actors are going through, right? Mm-hmm. So let's move on to you, because also I could talk to each of you for the whole show, but I'm going to try to keep
I also remember when Monty had gotten were you just out of college? And he called me and came over and showed me a student film that you had done.
Thesis
I
film.
remember, yeah.
Donna was the first person I contacted as soon as I got out of film school, because she was a professional doing it in Denver, and I needed to talk to someone, and sort of learn.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's hear a little about your background.
Well, I was raised on a farm in Iowa. It's my great-grandfather's farm, so had long family history there. And I went to the University of Nebraska, and I studied fine arts and English, and thought, well, I'll be a teacher. You know, that's what else can you do with fine arts and English? And so I became a teacher, and I taught in Compton, California for a while. And while I was teaching there, Jim Phelan, actually, who is a director here in town and who I later married, asked me if I would come on a set and be an extra at a shoot they were doing in Los Angeles. And I did, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I thought, this is exactly what I want to do. It embodied everything that I was interested in. It embodied writing, it embodied the visual arts, and also there was some business involved. So there were those parameters, the parameters of business, and also it was collaborative. It wasn't like you had to work alone as an artist or as a writer, although there are times when that is also part of the process. But I love the collaboration of the other crew people, and I also really loved the commitment that everyone had. Everyone was doing something that they loved doing, and they were also doing something that wasn't necessarily offering a lot of security, and they were willing to take that risk. And then I moved back to Denver, and we started a company called Phelan Productions, and we did television commercials all over the country for many years. And then eventually, Rock and I started a company called Dewey Obenchain Films. Once again, we sort of made our bread and butter with television commercials, but we began exploring documentaries. And there would just be times when a subject would rear its head, and I think the only way to really explore this would be to do a documentary on it. The first one that we did that was met with a lot of success was a series called Homeboys, and we did that with Reverend Leon Kelly. We were doing a United Way commercial, and we met Reverend Kelly, and since I had taught school in Compton, I knew that there was a gang problem in Compton, and I could see by working with Reverend Kelly that one was developing here. So we were able to finance it ourselves at that time. Was the only way to just set out and do a documentary. And that was when you had to shoot on film. So it was quite a commitment, and we interviewed members of the Crips and the Bloods to ask them what they did, why they did it, who they did it to, what happened to them when they did it, and no one had done that before.
One thing I noticed was interesting about when I was looking in both your backgrounds, you said one thing about being a producer or being in film is to have perseverance and stick to it-ness. And you said you got that from sports. You said sports taught you that.
You know, I grew up in the film business with my mom and my dad, and so I think that I was interested in it, but didn't want to show them that I was interested in it. And sports was my life, and I took baseball very seriously, and I was actually drafted by the San Francisco Giants, but I was in school still studying mass communication and production. So when it didn't work out, I knew that film was where I needed to be.
As a producer and as an actor, what hat do you like to wear the most?
You know, well, the reason that I became a producer on this project is I got the script, and there's this catch-22 in Los Angeles. When you're trying to be an actor, you got to have work to get work. And so I read a script that was hilarious. It was fantastic, and it was called Skills Like This. And so I got it to my mom, and in turn she knew that Monty would be the right guy to direct it. And so we just kind of put our heads together, and I knew that I really wanted to play this role. And so the only way to do it was to keep it out of studio's hands and make sure that we could do it independently